just painting a rainbow on something does not do it, doesn't cut it. Many of us are feeling like we need to reclaim everything about the spirit that was Stonewall and the marches that happened afterwards. And so that's what we're doing this year. We have to go back to what it was in 1970, in 1971. The standard activity that was happening on the last Sunday of June to celebrate sort of Stonewall sort of morphed into something else. It became no longer a march and started to move into the realm of a parade. So that's why for the Queer Liberation March, no corporate floats, no police in our march, no politicians, at least not politicians holding signs, vote for me, right? That whole recentering. We want to get it away from this parade model where the people who are on the street and in the parade and on these floats are the entertainment, and the people along the sidewalk are sort of the audience. It's a march against state power and against stigma in society and all the other ways that we suffer. Those early marches were, people's marches, protest marches. It was still illegal for many of those years for people to just be out and to be gay. You couldn't drink in a bar. Those folks that were marching in the early years were marching for their lives, they were marching for their rights, they were marching for visibility and acknowledgement of the issues of the community as a whole. If I see one more rainbow on something that's not directly connected to the struggles that we're living in, I think I'm going to be sick. It's not helping me be more free. It's just saying, okay, we see you. Okay, but you're not seeing all of the details. You're just seeing the rainbows. Things that happen when a parade gets developed are things like barricades get set up, and floats get set up, and corporate money flows in support of these activities. And in a way, when that happens, it's erasing and making us invisible, the people who are actually supposed to be the center of the march. We may have achieved marriage equality, but the stigma that underlies, right, who's going to bake the cake and who's not going to bake the cake, is still existing. The stigma has to go. If we're not looking at the way in which we're under attack in society, and we're not saying that, we're certainly not going to get it in a parade. Pride Parade became a parade because, people were awash with something else, so maybe they didn't see it. So a lot of this effort is really, we're trying to reignite the movement too, and bring people back into it. Like, put on the right glasses now, folks. We have to have the right way to view social problems. The Queer Liberation March is going to be a stark sort of contrast to the parade, and that's important as its own political point.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.